Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I am going to be doing a walkthrough of the GCSE Sociology question paper. So for this one I'm using the AQA 2019 Families and Education paper, which you can find on the AQA website along with the mark scheme and examiner report, which I would recommend you go have a read through. The examiner reports tend to be quite useful in directing revision. I am basing the answers here off the mark scheme, so definitely go have a look at that as well to look at some of the alternate responses, or maybe give the paper a go first and then have a little look at the mark scheme, mark it yourself and see how you did, as I think that marking papers and seeing where you maybe went wrong is the best way to focus your revision. Righty, so question 1 and 2 are both going to be multiple choice questions no matter which paper you are doing. These ones are relatively easy to answer as long as you have a basic understanding of the key terms and key concepts, as a lot of the time you can just try and infer your response. So question 1 here, what term is commonly used by sociologists to describe a family that consists of a couple whose children have moved out the family home? The answer here would be C, the empty nest family, which you can kind of, as they sort of guess based off the fact the other options are beanpole, blended and extended family, though having a good understanding of these concepts will help you throughout the paper, so just that's the best way to prepare for these ones. Question 2, which sociological perspective focuses on patriarchy and gender relationships? The answer is A, feminist. Alrighty, now we go into the 3-mark questions, which usually are pretty good to answer, again, as long as you have sort of an understanding of some key theorists and some key theories. You don't necessarily need to name a theorist, I just think it helps with answering the questions, such as with this one, describe one function of families. So the way I would answer this is I'd say something along the lines of, according to functionalist Murdoch, one function of the families is the educational function. This is where families socialise children into the norms and values of society to create a consensus where they are raised sort of knowing right from wrong and how to behave. It's the responsibility of the family. You don't have to mention that it's Murdoch's theory, I just think that's a good way to start your point. Basically, the way that the mark scheme says to answer this is just educational function, socialising into norms and values. Question 4, identify and describe one criticism that Marxists make about families. So you would have multiple sort of possible responses to this question. On the mark scheme, they talk about social inequalities continue from one generation to the next. They talk about educational advantages and the socialisation process in people accepting their position as fair. So notice how it says one criticism. One is in bold in this question, meaning do not just make a list, make sure it is one that is then described. Identify and describe. So the way I've answered this one criticism that Marxists make about families is that they continue social inequality. For example, families transfer inheritance, which will then increase the wealth divide as the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. By having a larger inheritance, you're going to have better opportunities in life. For example, you'll be able to afford to go to better schools, you'll be able to afford better resources, you might be able to afford to start your own company. Whereas if you're born with little inheritance, you're going to have potentially less opportunities in life. As a result, the institution of the family passes on inequality, makes it more difficult for the working class to succeed. You could use just less words than that, but that's essentially how I'd answer that one. All right, and now we've got an item question. I do like the item questions as I think they do tend to give you the answer away a little bit as long as you're making sure you're reading it. So question 5 is from item A, examine one strength of the research. And item A says, using structured interview, the British Social Attitude Survey conducted research into the domestic division of labour. They used a nationally representative sample of couples in heterosexual relationships. The individuals involved were asked a series of questions about their attitudes and behaviours. The table below shows some of the results. And as you can also see in this table, you've got 3 different dates. So already you have got 2 advantages given to you in the question. It is nationally representative, and it's also possible to repeat the research to make comparisons. Making sure, again, it does say just one strength, and this is only a 2-mark question, so you don't have to go into too much detail. The way that I've answered this question is I've said one strength of this research is that it is nationally representative. As a result, it's more likely to be accurate about the way that labour is divided within heterosexual couples across the UK. Simple as that. Just make sure you read these questions carefully. As I say, they pretty much give it to you. Not always, but a lot of the time. Question 6. Identify and explain one factor that may account for the traditional division of the domestic... Sorry, 1 second. Apologise, I'm still a little bit ill. That is why it's taken so long for this video to get out. Anyway, question 6. Identify and explain one factor that may account for the traditional division of domestic labour shown in item A. So here I have brought in a theorist again, which again you don't have to, I just think it helps. So according to feminist Duncan and Marsden, the one factor that may account for the traditional division of domestic labour shown in item A is the triple shift. With the progress of feminism, women are now expected to participate in domestic, emotional and paid labour. Within this research, you can see that the majority of women do the laundry and the majority of women care for sick family members, although the caring for sick family members can also be seen as equal. What the point that you're trying to make here is that women are fulfilling the emotional role and fulfilling the domestic role more often than the men are. You could also mention about different forms of socialisation. Obviously, you need to focus on one factor, so it's whichever you think you could explain the most. Socialisation is a good one. So one factor that may account for the traditional division of domestic labour is socialisation, which you could then actually add on Duncan and Marsden. You could say, oh, according to Duncan and Marsden, women are more expected to do these 3 different tasks. Meanwhile, men are socialised to sort of be more DIY savvy. As a result, this is more likely to have them, make the small repairs around the house than women. You could talk a bit about childhood and canalisation, the toys that people are given. So where boys might be given a toolkit to play with and girls might be given dolls to play with and dolls to care for and to dress up as nurses. I think the best way you could answer this one is socialisation, but I would also maybe try to bring in Duncan and Marsden there just a little bit, maybe to add on to how they are socialised, just because it's a good way to get a mark in there. Alrighty. Question 7. Identify and explain one disadvantage of using structured interviews to investigate conjugal role relationships. So this is essentially just using a criticism of structured interviews. And again, you need to make sure you're reading the questions carefully, because you need to make sure you are answering the question for structured interviews and not unstructured interviews, as they are very, very different when you are looking at strengths and weaknesses. So one disadvantage of using structured interviews to investigate conjugal role relationships is that they are quite rigid in the fact that you can't fully explore different ideas. It's basically just a yes or no response. It's a structured interview. You can't explore routes you find interesting because you just got to move on to the next question, which is already predetermined and preset. And because conjugal role relationships might be a more personal topic, being within the family, you might want to have that freedom to look into what people personally believe, to be able to get a full valid picture. So I would use the term validity. I'd say the fact that they are quite rigid means you're less likely to get valid data, as you can't fully explore routes you might find interesting. They are quite restrictive, and when you're investigating something like the family, you want it to be more open, as it is a personal topic. Just make sure you are applying to the situation as well. All right, question 8. From item B, identify and describe the research method used by Oakley, including what you know of her perspective of the family. So Anne Oakley. Oakley defined conventional families as nuclear families composed of legally married couples voluntarily choosing the parenthood of one or more children, with parents and children living together as a distinct domestic unit. Oakley suggested that, if judged by statistical data alone, conventional family life was no longer the norm. However, she noted the idea remained a powerful feature of our society. Oakley based her analysis on a review of available data, including the work of other sociologists. So it's already told us here she used statistical data and secondary data from other sociologists. So, Anne Oakley used secondary research using statistics and the secondary work of other sociologists. She wrote from a feminist perspective and analysed the data she had available to her to conclude that conventional families, although they are no longer the norm, they are still really important within our society. What the mark scheme says here, as I think this is a bit of a difficult one to get the full marks in, it says secondary sources, work of other sociologists, statistical data, and then your AO2 is rights from a feminist perspective. She suggested the idea of the conventional family was one of interpretation. She compared and analysed a range of pre-existing research. She used the data to provide a critical analysis, investigating the idea of the conventional family and how it's still idealised, and she supported it with relevant statistical data. And that's what the mark scheme says. That's how you get the full marks on that. Question 9. Identify one ethical issue you need to consider. Sorry, one second again. When investigating attitudes towards arranged marriage, and explain how you would deal with the issue in your investigation. So again, you want to look at ethical issue, attitudes towards arranged marriage. So just think about your ethical issues with any form of research. One that sort of applies to everything is you always need the informed consent of the participants, and you want to keep them confidential and anonymous. For this one, I've gone with confidentiality. One ethical issue to consider when investigating attitudes towards arranged marriage is confidentiality. You would need to ensure that you keep the details of all participants secure and do not link them to their responses. And then you've got to apply to the context of arranged marriage. So since arranged marriage is quite a personal topic, it's important to make sure that you are not sort of exposing your participants' responses, potentially to help them avoid harm, but also, as I say, because it's quite a personal topic. Anything related to the family really might be seen as more personal and not something that you want everyone to know that you've participated. It's just sort of a general ethical issue anyway in research that your participants should not be revealed. Unless they have given consent to do so. Some forms of research you might do that. Particularly with secondary research, you're obviously going to be mentioning the sources you've used. Alrighty, so now we're going into the 12 marker. As I said, I'm just going to do the 112 marker, as I think I can give you just sort of a structure which you can apply to any of them. Just make sure that you know your content and you know your theorists. I also want you to have a go at question 11 on your own without me giving you the answers. So I think that's a good way to prepare. So question 10, discuss how far sociologists would agree that families are the main agent of socialisation. To begin with, you want to write an introduction. Your introduction should only be brief, and I like to say introductions should be mini conclusions. This is something you can carry over to A-level as well. It's a really helpful skill in essays. As for example, the way you might do it is, with my response, I said that families are the main agent of socialisation, even if other institutions are taking over a little bit. So I'd say functionalists and feminists both agree that the family is a main agent of socialisation. Whether or not this is positive, is up for debate. However, other sociologists might suggest that the family is now reduced significance, might have been overtaken by other institutions such as the media, schools, or government-funded schemes. On balance, family is still the main agent of socialisation. Something along the lines of that. Bearing in mind I'm going off the top of my head here. And then paragraph 1, I've gone with an agree. So I'd usually go agree, agree, disagree, or disagree, agree, agree. Just make sure your paragraphs do agree with what you're saying. Even if it's an against, make sure you evaluate it. So the end of your paragraph is, yes, my idea is the correct idea. Not like that, of course, but just make sure you're not contradicting yourself. So my first paragraph is an agree anyway. So according to functionalists Parsons and Murdoch, the family is a main agent of socialisation. Both sociologists describe it as one of the core functions of the family. Even though Parsons attempted to condense Murdoch's functions, he still includes socialisation as its own key component. As a result, it does seem to hold some importance. Primary socialisation is needed before school. The norms and values should be learned at home and then reaffirmed through the secondary institutions. Basically, everything initially that you learn will be from observing behaviour at home. Your speech, your manners, saying please and thank you when you're out and about in the supermarket. A lot of the time it is the family that will begin these ideas, and these will just be added on by the secondary institutions. An evaluation of this, you can use contemporary examples. There's an ant on my desk, however silly they may seem. So the one I've got here is, however, In recent years, there has been a growth in the phenomenon of iPad babies, where the media tends to be raising children more than the families as its main agent of socialisation. And children are left before the iPad or a screen all day, and that is what is teaching them about these different norms and values. For example, Cocomelon. You can use these examples in your exam, by the way, I have done it. But then an evaluation of that is this is being quite general. Not every child is raised entirely by iPads. It's a bit of an exaggeration to say they spend 24 hours a day in front of their iPads. So on balance, the family is still the main agent of socialisation. This hasn't been completely displaced by the growth in the media. And then we'll go into paragraph 2, say feminists also agree that families are the main agent of socialisation, although they do not say so in a positive manner. Feminists suggest that the family reaffirms patriarchy. For example, Dunscombe and Marsden talk about the triple shift and how this is originally ingrained in women from childhood. We can see this through the toys, the clothes, the canonisation through the family, where parents might buy, as we say, a nurse costume for young girls, or firefighter costume for a young boy, being raised into these different roles from the beginning. However, an evaluation of this is again through the media, whereas you might have films marketed towards girls, Disney princesses, or you might have films marketed towards boys, like Cars. Although these are delivered through the family, it's ultimately the media that is reaffirming these ideas, or like the advertisements you see on TV that are encouraging the family to do these things in the first place. It's the media at the root of the matter. And they can also be reaffirmed or challenged through school, through education. I remember when I was in primary school, we had, the girls and boys toys, girls and boys books, but you weren't forced to read them, which could then be an evaluation, just children's choice at the end of the day. You have families that are overriding these values. You have people, raising their children gender neutral. And that is something you can use in the evaluation of your evaluation to eventually say, yes, families are the main agent of socialisation, although feminists are not necessarily correct in saying that this is a bad thing, because a lot of the time they can actually challenge these patriarchal beliefs that might be further encouraged by the media or through school. And they are powerful in doing that. And my third paragraph, I've mentioned about different institutions. So I say, however, sociologists such as Murray, no, it's not really Murray, but I've used him as an example, but I wouldn't say at the beginning of the paragraph actually for this point, that doesn't quite work. However, some sociologists might suggest that the family has reduced significance as a main agent of socialisation as other institutions have taken over. For example, Murray suggests that lone parent families, which are on the rise, are ineffective at socialising children. To combat this, the government originally introduced this thing called Sure Start Centres, which would help with the socialisation of children, although ultimately it was still the family doing it. They were just given the assistance of the government, and this has been removed now, but you could say something along those lines. And then you could evaluate that by saying, well, actually, we might have these institutions that are helping. We might have the media, we might have preschools, we might have Sure Start Centres. At the end of the day, families are still a core agent in socialisation. They have been for a long time, and this is in repeated research through Parsons, Murdoch, etc. over time. So on balance, the families are still a main agent of socialisation, which would then put in your conclusion. In conclusion, families are the core main agent of socialisation, and then you summarise what you said in your essay just to sort of repeat your point and fully prove it. Okay, so that is us to the end of the families paper, except for the question on marriage being important in Britain today. You can mark that yourself if you look on the mark scheme. It does tell you the content that you should be looking for. It also has the mark scheme here. So level 4 being detailed knowledge and understanding of relevant theories, concepts, evidence, methods presented in a well-developed answer. So your AO1, your first assessment objective, would be basically what I said there, just making sure you're sticking to a consistent point throughout. Don't stray from the point. Don't say, oh yeah, families are the main agent of socialisation, and then you end your essay, they're not. Just make sure you always have that on balance, that link at the end of each paragraph, just to show what you're fully answering at the end. Sustained application of relevant theories, concepts, evidence. That's AO2. So as you see, I've got my theories here, and I've got the silly examples like the iPad babies. Develop critical analysis and evaluation. So your AO3, just make sure that you are not just saying this is a perfect argument. None of them are going to be a perfect argument, even if you agree with them. just make sure you have an evaluation. And if it is the point you agree with, just evaluate the evaluation. Say, well, actually, this evaluation makes sense, but it's not great. Okay, so that is that all done for you guys. If you have any more questions or there's any other videos you'd like to see, please make sure you leave a comment down below and I will be happy to have a look for you. Hope you're all doing well. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you next video. Bye.